This is TWiT.
This episode of Tech Break is brought to you by ACI Learning. Audit, IT, and cybersecurity skills become outdated in about 18 months. If you run an IT, cybersecurity, or audit department, or lead a learning and development group, ACI Learning can craft an effective, affordable training solution to keep your team future-proof. Visit go.acilearning.com/twit to elevate your talent. BNPL. Buy now, pay later. Apple announced it was going to do this. When did it announce that? Like in the fall, right? A while ago. It's finally launching.
Oh.
It's funny because there is a lot of people saying BNPL, buy now, pay later, is not consumer friendly. It's not good. Consumers may like it, but it gets them into financial trouble. The way Apple's doing it maybe is not so dangerous. You can use a service.
Short. It's like 6 weeks.
Yeah,
right?
it's 6 weeks. It's loans of $50 to $1,000. I presume to buy an Apple product, but then you have 4 payments over the course of 6 weeks. That's not exactly a long term to pay it back with no interest or fees.
Yeah, maybe that's how they're hoping to not be hoodwinking their customers into going underwater. You'd be really, really scared if they said you got 2 years to pay. Here's the APR.
Yeah,
and now you're basically getting people to pay $3,000 for like a
they can't afford.
Laptop.
Yeah,
exactly. It would be interesting. It would be an interesting thing if it's like. I know that you're going to be buying a phone sometime in the next 3 months. I know that you're in the 3 months in which you're saving up for it. We don't want to take the risk that you may buy a different phone or you might buy a different laptop. So we will let you buy it now, and then at the point where you were planning to buy it anyway, you will be able to pay it off. As usual, I wish I really knew what Apple's end game was for banking. It doesn't seem like the only way it makes sense for me is if they see this as a way to sell more Macs, sell more hardware, sell more services. Because if they really do want to get into the credit game, that's a scary place for them to be. That's so antithetical to a lot of the historical points of view that Apple has had. I don't see them being a money lender. I don't see them being a rent collector. I don't see them being renting a sofa and then taking it back 8 months later and leaving people on the hook for $5,000 for the payments. And those are the things you sort of associate with these other credit card issuers. So I hope that they don't get. I hope that they don't wind up in another AirTag situation where it gives them nothing but bad press.
I'm sure Goldman Sachs is underwriting it, right? But The Verge found a little fine print you may be interested to hear. According to Apple, users can apply for this loan within the Apple Wallet, quote, with no impact on their credit, end quote. But the company notes in the fine print that the pay later loan and payment history, quote, may be reported to credit bureaus and impact their credit. So. It will impact your credit.
I think that the issue there is that they said it originally because I think that's probably what they believed, and then what's happened is that that's not
you can't do it. That's not how it works.
Or the check doesn't, but if you fail to pay it, absolutely does. Something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, Andy, I totally see your point, but I feel like what Apple is doing here is actually a different, quintessentially Apple thing, which is they're looking at the success of buy now, pay later services with certain age groups and saying, well, we could let somebody else administer that program, or we could just do it ourselves and control it all, which is a very Apple thing to do. But I see your point. Like, it is a weird choice too. Maybe it was one of the easier things for them to do, but Apple doing, being its own bank and doing all these other things that we've heard rumored, this is a strange sort of thing to roll out. But, then again, I think Apple's found that disrupting the financial industry and the banking industry is a lot harder than disrupting the cell phone industry was, because Apple Pay just launched in South Korea, I think, just this week or this month, and that Apple Pay in South Korea in a major market, and yet it's limited to one card in South Korea. So there's all sorts of, I don't know. I owe to be a fly on the wall of the Apple financial team and hear about what they choose to prioritize or what they choose to launch just because it's the thing that they could manage to get.
I bet there's a
approval.
whole building of lawyers because financial and banking regulations.
Only one?
maybe a couple of buildings. This is complicated stuff. I know because I watched Billions on Showtime, and I remember he really wanted to be a bank and all
it's
the
Paul
things.
Giamatti.
Yeah,
it's like, wait a second.
Well, I think that this is a really. I think if you look at, I still think that if you look at Apple Pay, they let somebody else administer that. This is Apple Financial Services, or it's a sub. They have their own thing that they're.
I think it's Goldman, right? Goldman's probably. Wait a minute.
No.
Apple's handling it by itself.
This is their pilot project of their own, be their own bank.
It's by a new subsidiary called Apple Financing LLC.
Limited liability. Very careful
Limited
there.
Liability.
So, but I think that and Apple has the money to back this up. It'll be interesting to see. There's still, Apple is one of the only companies in the world, and it would be very is one of the only companies in the world that could build a closed loop system where they're offering you credit and then, offering people savings all inside of the same pipeline. And it just feels like they're sneaking up on it. Like they're just adding one more little thing. Let's figure this out for a little while. Let's one more little thing.
This is very slow, though, toe in. This is only available on iPhones and iPads and to a random selection of users.
But this is a very complicated thing, and I think I still feel like Apple is just kind of figuring this out slowly because they know how dangerous and deep the water is. But there's a lot of people that are not. There's a lot of people that just don't care about their bank, and I think that Apple looks at that like, the banks don't do what they do very well. Apple thinks that it can do it better. It builds a very tight relationship, and if you look at larger financial things like cars and other things like that, being able to provide that financing as well as provide savings opportunities to make that all work is not something like typically banks can't afford to do that kind. Banks we just saw recently can't having large deposits are not necessarily the safest thing in the world. Smaller deposits are not very profitable, but if you're just cutting out 1 or 2% of interest or taking that 1 or 2% of interest out of the system, it could be very profitable for a company like Apple. It could be billions and billions of dollars that they get kind of by cutting everybody else out slowly. And so I think that it still feels like Apple is just kind of, I know it sounds crazy, but it looks like they're really sneaking up on this horse.
So despite the fact that Apple has a new subsidiary, the company partnered with the BNPL program MasterCard Installments to enable it, while, quote, Goldman Sachs is the issuer of the MasterCard payment credentials. So it's a little bit of Apple, a little bit of other things as well.
The easiest way to do it. It's the easiest way to dip your toe into that.
Oh, absolutely. I really think there probably is a debate within Apple about, there's a lot of profit here, but there's also a lot of risk, both reputationally and otherwise. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau identified several areas of risk of consumer harm in BNPL programs, including inconsistent consumer protections, a prevalence of data harvesting, and a risk of debt accumulation, which, of course, is always the risk with all of these. By the way, good job, Emma Roth at The Verge on her reporting on this. A lot of inside stuff. So this, and this makes me wonder also about the savings account, because before 16.4 came out, when it was still in beta, there was a lot of conversation about stuff in the code referring to kind of accounts. 16.4 had references to routing and account numbers, current balance, interest earned, data management, funds available for withdrawal, and more. Have we seen anything in 16.4, the release, that indicates Apple savings is happening imminently, or it still hasn't happened, right? I can't still
don't think so.
Still don't have that high yield savings account. I know, Alex, you've said for a long time Apple should be a bank.
I'm not saying they should. I'm saying they're going.
They're going to.
I'm not saying that they should. I'm saying that it just, I can see these trajectories, and it just, wow, it doesn't look like, why would you do any of the things you're doing if you weren't going to become a bank? Like, that's the thing, is that, so if you weren't going to become a bank, you wouldn't do any of these things. And so I'm not saying that Apple should do it. I'm just saying that they could, and they really look like they are 5 years.
Right now, they're just doing what merchants do. They're not doing, well, the savings account would be what a bank does, of course.
Yeah.
And Apple Pay, to the degree that you could pay others, you can't pay bills with it yet, right? mean, I pay my hairdresser with it.
I pay the same hairdresser with it.
Yes, that's right.
Apple Pay.
We have
Yeah,
the same
exactly.
hairdresser.
So, but I keep a bunch of money in Apple Pay all the time because that's kind of I can use it all the time. I don't have to, and so I
have $1,738 in my wallet. That's because I accumulate, 1%, 2%, and 3% when I make purchases. Wow.
Time to transfer some of it back to your bank.
I might take that back. Is it insured? Is it FDIC insured? Is this like being in Silicon Valley Bank?